Houston, 2003. 34-year-old Jeff Wright is murdered by his wife. On this January night in Texas, Susan Wright, a woman described as beautiful, meek, and mild-mannered, stabbed her husband not once, not twice, but 193 times. Was he an abusive spouse? Maybe. Did she tie him to the bed before plunging a knife into his body nearly 200 times? Possibly. This case has everything: deception, abuse, mental illness, drugs, and yes, murder. Or was it just a last-ditch effort of self-defense by a battered wife? This is Susan Wright, Blue-Eyed Blonde or Blackened Heart. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potterworth. Welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. Or for our Italian friends, ben arrivata.
That's sexy.
I'm sure I chopped that up.
Ciao, baby. Ciao. Ciao.
Yeah, there you go. And also want to let you know that we have changed things around just a little bit. I am now recording from my console in the studio, and Chris is in the vocal booth. It's just from a production standpoint, it's a lot easier. So,
yes, it is.
I
can see him.
Yeah.
But he's in the other room through the glass.
Yeah. And you get to kind of see what I do during the time that
he can make loving hand gestures to me from there.
That's it.
Well, wherever you're listening, be it Italy or the United States, go ahead and like, rate, and review this podcast. That helps other people to find us. We also have a closed Facebook group, The In-Laws and Outlaws. Go join that. All you have to do is look up H2H or Hitched to Homicide, and The In-Laws and Outlaws will pop up. All you have to do is answer a few questions, and you're in. But that is the spot where we get to discuss all of these cases, and this one we're really going to discuss this week. I have a feeling.
Nice.
Yeah. I'm going to jump right in. It's a little bit longer today. I always say I could have broken this into two pieces and made it a little bit shorter, but you know me, I'm going to power through. So if you have to walk a little bit further or pick me up on the way home instead of just on the way to work.
Yep.
I'm sorry, or thank you for continuing. Before we start, I want to thank some sources: Murderpedia, Texas Monthly, Wikipedia, 48 Hours, the Tyler Morning Telegraph, the Plainview Herald, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and the Houston Chronicle.
All right, let's do it.
Susan Lucille Wright was born on April 25, 1976, in Houston, Texas, to Sue and Jimmy Wright. She has a brother, Jim, and a sister, Cindy. Susan, Cindy, and their brother Jim were raised in an upper-middle-class home in the Champions area of northwest Harris County.
Okay.
Their mother was, in Cindy's words, quote, the quintessential stay-at-home mom who baked meals from scratch, end quote.
She was Betty Crocker.
I had one of those, too. My mom was that way.
Yeah, so was my mom.
And their father was a prosperous mechanical engineer with a temper. Now, according to statements Cindy and Susan both have made, their father would go into rages and attack their mother. Sometimes he even beat the kids.
Oh, wow.
Quote, we learned to walk on eggshells, Susan said. We did our best to put on a smile and make everything look normal. When he got mad, we tried not to be seen. I thought that's what happened in every house. If you'd told me every husband didn't yell at his wife or make her feel less than dirt, I wouldn't have believed you, end quote.
That's too bad.
Now, Susan was an average student in high school. She made C's in most of her classes. She had a few boyfriends, but when one boyfriend criticized her looks, she went on a diet, dropping 19 pounds.
Wow.
And in her senior year, just after she'd turned 18, she made a decision at the encouragement of another boyfriend that utterly confused her sister and her mother. She went to work as a dancer at a topless bar called the Gold Cup in far north Houston.
The Gold Cup?
The Gold Cup.
Okay.
The topless bar. Shouldn't it be the Gold Cups?
Or how about the Gold Cupless?
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah.
And after 2 months of dancing, though, she quit. And though she did stay on for several months as a waitress. And she said, quote, "I thought I would like the attention and maybe feel better about myself, but I was never comfortable and the money wasn't worth it." Now, I want to stop here and make a point because there are going to be some head-scratching moments in this case, especially to me, and this is one of them. Nothing against exotic dancers. I'm sure they make great money. But there's a story that said that Susan was really shy and timid when she was in high school, and she left one school because the girls were mean to her and moved to another high school. So that just didn't really fit. That personality didn't really fit to me, as somebody, an 18-year-old girl who has the confidence to dance on stage, topless.
Yeah, I mean, that takes a lot of chutzpah.
It does, and yet she did, and she danced for those 2 months, 8 weeks, and then she stopped dancing and became a waitress.
Okay.
And when she gave it up, she used the money to enroll in a nursing program at a community college and worked at a hair salon. According to Susan herself, school was too much time, it was just too time-consuming, and it was also really expensive. And so she dropped out.
Okay.
In April of 1997, on a road trip to Galveston, Texas with a friend, Susan meets Jeff Wright. Jeffrey Andrew Wright was born on March 1st, 1968, in Kenosha, Wisconsin, to Kay and Ronald Wright Sr.
Wisconsin.
Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yeah. The Cheese Castle is right outside of Kenosha.
I know. I always think of Fargo whenever I hear somebody's from Wisconsin.
Well, that's not Wisconsin.
I know,
that's
but
North Dakota.
I know, but it's that northern everybody.
It's that same.
Yeah.
And we pass, I have a sister who lives in Milwaukee, and I always pass through Kenosha, and I always see the Cheese Castle. So if you know what I'm talking about, we are friends. All of a sudden, we are now friends. Yeah. Somehow, his whole family moves from Kenosha to Texas. Okay? I don't know when, don't know how, but Jeff has a sister and a brother. His brother's name is Ronald Jr., and according to many sources, Jeff spent a lot of his time as a teen and a young adult partying his kneecaps off.
Good Lord.
He liked to drink, and he liked to do cocaine, and he liked girls. He was called a womanizer by many who have been interviewed about him. He was also seen as charming and talkative, and he liked to have fun. He sometimes liked to do drugs, and he liked to go to topless bars.
The cupless.
Cupless bars.
Sorry.
Topless bars,
yes.
Right. But as his 30th birthday is looming on the horizon, Jeff starts thinking about becoming a better man, and he wanted to eventually settle down and have a wife and a family.
Okay.
Do you think it's 30 years old when men start thinking about that? I think it's just whenever you start thinking about it. I think everybody's timetable is different.
I can only give you the male perspective. I think it all hinges on where you are in your life and as far as your career and how you feel about yourself.
That's true. Very true. But when he's getting close to 30 is when he meets Susan. It's 1997. Jeff is 29. Susan's only 20. And she's waitressing at a restaurant in Galveston, Texas, and he's working in sales.
Okay.
These two meet. They go out on a double date. They fall in love immediately. He brought her flowers. He took her to nice restaurants. He took her to nightclubs. And not long after they meet, he tells her, "I love you."
He was smitten.
Yeah, I love you.
Yeah.
Quote, "He was very sweet and very handsome with beautiful brown eyes. He met my parents and told them about his dream of someday owning his own carpeting and flooring business. I thought he was wonderful," end quote.
Okay.
Now, not long after they meet, in February of 1998, Susan gets pregnant. And according to Susan, Jeff told her that he would be okay if she had an abortion. But at the time, Susan was working at an orthodontist office, and according to Susan, she, at Jeff's request, would hand over her paycheck to him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What? Okay.
They're not married.
Yeah,
they're
I know.
Not engaged.
That's what's crazy.
They're not anything. But they do get married. These two get married in a quiet little church wedding in October of 1998 when Susan is about 8 months or a little further along, 8 months pregnant. And a month later, Jeff and Susan have a son, Bradley.
Okay.
Now, some of their friends will say that marriage seemed to agree with Jeff. They thought he was a proud father and he liked the stability of family. He really liked family life. And I think he came from a really good family. Susan was a stay-at-home mom, and soon after, she's going to get pregnant again. She's going to lose the second baby, something we're going to come back to. And then a year after that, she's pregnant again. And in 2002, these two have a daughter, Kaylee.
She's fertile.
Fertile Myrtle.
Yep.
Fertile Myrtle. Now, from this point forward, there are two different stories. I'm going to tell them both to you. You can make the call on you make the call. I love doing this for football, and it's football season. It's sweater weather here.
Yeah.
I've got on a sweater today.
I got my Bengals sweatshirt on.
Yeah, so we're going to let you make the call. You get to play judge and jury on today's Hitched to Homicide. I'm not going to take a side on this. I'm going to lay out the facts and let you come to your own conclusions. I'll do my best not to let my voice show one way or the other how I feel, because I honestly don't know. I really don't know how I feel about this.
Okay.
So according to Susan on the outside, their marriage seemed like it was golden. He had a great job as a sales rep for a flooring company. They had a nice home, 2 beautiful children, right?
Yep.
Susan says that Jeff required her to keep him abreast of her whereabouts at all times. He needed to know where she was, what she was doing, and Jeff only permitted her to leave the house for short periods of time, and if she didn't tell him where she was, like if she went to her parents' home and stayed longer than an hour, Jeff would accuse Susan of cheating.
Can you say control freak?
Yeah.
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 Paranoid control freak. That's a bad combination.
Yeah. Now, Susan has said that she was expected to keep a perfect home and that even a simple toy on the floor or dinner arriving a little late to the table would send Jeff into a fit of rage. He'd have a go to pieces. And after their first child, Susan says that Jeff, in the midst of her postpartum depression, would call her a fat ass and would chastise her for gaining so much weight while she was pregnant.
Wow.
And then he wouldn't let her take her antidepressants, which were prescribed for her, telling her that she needed to, quote, suck it up and do her job, end quote.
I can't imagine why she was depressed.
Yeah, he's got a heart of gold, right?
Yeah, exactly. Man of the year.
Yeah. Well, Jeff wanted Susan to be a stay-at-home mom, and when Susan asked if she could take some courses at a junior college, Jeff goes, nope.
Yeah, not on my watch.
And when she did visit the campus one night, just trying to enroll in an internet course so she could be at home and not on campus,
right.
Jeff was furious, and he accused her of going there to cheat on him and called her a, quote, nasty whore, end quote.
Not that part, but it reminds me of my big fat Greek wedding.
Yeah.
When she tells her dad that she's going to go to community college. And he goes, why you want to leave me?
Why you want to leave me? Yeah. Well, I wish that Jeff was that nice. I don't think he is.
No, I don't think so either.
Susan also claimed that Jeff's temper became unpredictable and dangerous when he used weed and cocaine. And in fact, Jeff has a record. He pled guilty to a felony drug charge to avoid jail time in 1996. It was for possession of weed. Susan will say that she never knew anything about this and he never mentioned it when they met. That's not all he never told her about.
Okay.
A few years before he meets Susan, Jeff is engaged to a girl named Misty. Misty will eventually file a police report after Jeff throws a glass in an Austin, Texas bar and a shard hits Misty in the face. And after this, according to Misty, Jeff thought she was flirting with another man.
Okay.
Misty is also a
dancer.
Topless dancer.
Topless dancer.
A topless dancer. Now, Susan has said that Jeff smoked pot almost every afternoon when he got home from work. And then sometimes after getting high, he would pick up their little boy, Bradley, and toss him in the air and catch him. And one night, Susan tells Jeff that she really doesn't like the way he plays with their son. And he tells her, quote, you don't have the right to tell me when or how I can pick up my son, end quote.
Wow.
So he's very controlling and possessive. He's not going to be told what to do.
Okay.
When they move into their new home in 1999 and after little Bradley is born, everything kind of escalates. Anything would set him off. If the house wasn't spotless, if dinner was bad, if the baby was crying. And Susan said that Jeff hit or kicked her repeatedly in the chest, in the stomach, and in the back and in the legs.
Wow.
And when they would visit his parents in Austin, if the visit didn't go smoothly, he would yell at her on the way home to Houston. Quote, he would grab my shoulder and throw me up against the window. He would grab the back of my head and bash it against the dashboard because it was my fault, end quote.
Wow.
Jeff would even abuse their dog. Sorry, I have to say this, but it's important. A 60-pound chow mix. He would kick the dog and occasionally throw him across the room.
Okay, what's wrong with me that I get more upset about him going after the dog?
Everybody does.
I know.
Not the dog.
I know.
But I got news for all of you. That's called foreshadowing.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
I need to get a sound effect for that.
You do.
Okay, I'll make one.
But Susan didn't tell anybody in her family that she was being beaten. She thought if she could be perfect enough, that Jeff would always be happy and then it would always work out. Now, to keep her neighbors from suspecting abuse, she rarely went out of the house when she had visible bruises on her body. She never considered going to a doctor or filing a police report because when Jeff found out, it would only make him more violent. Quote, he told me if I ever left him, he was going to kill me. It's not as simple as getting a divorce. When someone hurts you that bad and they tell you that they're going to kill you, you just can't get up and leave, end quote.
Wow.
Now, at one point, Susan did make an attempt to move out in the summer of 1999 after Jeff had beaten her and then forced her to apologize to him for his attack. When he left for work, she called her sister Cindy, who arrived with a U-Haul, and her husband. So you got to have somebody to help move, too. Can't just be Cindy and her sister. So she brings the husband.
Yeah.
They pack up Susan and Bradley's things, and they move to the home of Susan and Cindy's parents. And the next morning, Jeff calls Susan and tells her a moving van is going to be pulling up in front of that house and she needed to put all of her belongings in that van and return home. Otherwise, he would kill either her or Bradley.
Whoa.
And she did as she was told.
Wow.
Now, remember, this is all Susan's side of the story. That's what I'm telling first.
Okay.
Now, according to Susan, she tolerated all of this. She swallowed it down, didn't say anything. And when Susan becomes pregnant again in 2000, she loses the baby because Jeff kicked her in the stomach.
Jeez.
And according to her, she wasn't allowed to go to the hospital afterward because he didn't have enough money.
Oh, come on.
Whatever. That's what healthcare insurance, I don't know. Just that whole thing.
That sounds a bit hinky.
It's all wrong.
Yeah.
But she becomes pregnant again and then gives birth to Kaylee in December of 2001. And again, she has postpartum depression, which only made Jeff angry all over again. And it's then that he begins using an online dating service and sleeping with other women, where he contracted herpes and then passed it along to his wife.
Yeah.
And according to Susan, quote, he told me if I was a better wife, he wouldn't need other women, end quote.
Nice try, pal.
Now, by fall of 2002, Jeff had changed jobs. He wasn't making as much money and had gotten even more erratic in his behavior. He bought an air rifle. He said it was to keep the family in line.
Whoa.
He threw bricks at Susan in the backyard. And on New Year's Day, 2003, he tells Susan, according to her, quote, happy f***ing New Year, bitch. That will be your last, end quote.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
So Jeff would verbally abuse her, he would physically beat her up, and he would rape her, forcing sex even when she refused him. Susan's in a living hell.
Yeah.
Now, from the outside, the neighbors think that Jeff is a doting and proud father. He's charming. He's talkative. He was proud of his family. And it's important to note that Susan never, not once, does she ever file a police report.
Okay.
Never. Not once. And not once are her injuries documented.
So it's all her side.
He said, she said.
Okay.
Now, don't come for me and say, you got to believe women. I'm on the Me Too train. I believe women. I'm just laying out the facts I've already said from the get-go. You guys, I wanted you guys to figure this one out, okay?
Right. Going to look at both sides of the coin.
We're going to look at both sides. Now, after the start of the new year, Jeff decides he wants to put a fountain in the backyard of their house. And he digs the initial hole himself during those first couple of weeks in 2003. So it's business as usual in their suburban home in White Oak Bend in northwest Harris County, Texas. But Jeff's, quote, it'll be your last new year to his wife.
Right.
That's going to come back and bite him in the ass.
Okay.
January 13th, 2003. Jeff comes home from a boxing session. According to Susan, he's red-eyed, he's glassy-eyed, he's agitated. She says he's all coked up. He's on cocaine.
Okay.
He starts playing with Bradley, their son, trying to get him to box with him. And the 4-year-old little boy doesn't want to box with his dad. And when he gets bored and tries to toddle away, Jeff hits Bradley in the face or pushes him back. Regardless, Bradley falls and cries.
Wow.
And Jeff calls his son a pussy.
Wow.
Don't be a sissy, don't be a pussy, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Jeff walks away from the scene and takes a shower. So again, Susan has swallowed all this abuse, but now he's laid hands on her child.
Yeah.
And if you're a mother,
A mama bear.
you get it.
Yep.
It's at this point, according to Susan, she's done. Stick a fork in her, she's done.
Yep.
So after Susan puts the kids to bed, according to Susan, she confronts Jeff about the drugs and the abuse, and she tells him he needs to see someone. And if he refused, well, Susan gave him an ultimatum. I will pack up the kids. I will leave you. Susan's finally getting her balls out of her purse.
There you go.
Finally.
My favorite saying that you have.
Yes. So here's what Susan says happened next. The ultimatum, according to her, prompted a violent reaction. She said that Jeff pushed her to the floor, kicked her repeatedly in the stomach, then dragged her to the bed and raped her. Susan says that after the rape was over, she's lying in bed with her eyes closed, and her husband is saying, quote, "Die, bitch," end quote. When she opened her eyes, Susan said Jeff was hovering over her with a knife.
Okay.
Now, Susan is 5'4", 120 pounds. Jeff is 6'3", 220.
Okay.
According to Susan, driven by self-preservation and maternal instinct, she pushed her husband aside, kneeing him in the groin, and grabbed the knife from him. So she's angry as all get out. She knees him in the cookies, gets him in the cookies, grabs the knife from him, and in a frenzied struggle, she stabbed her husband again and again and again, fearing that he would kill her if she stopped.
Okay, I need to go back just a little bit. So when she says he was hovering over her, was he standing over her or was he on top of her?
Like straddling her over top of her.
And she
Kneed him in the cookies, and 120-pound, 5'4", 120-pound Susan takes charge of 6'2", 220-pound Jeff, who's also a boxer.
Okay.
And apparently has been doing cocaine.
Okay, so, yeah.
And then she starts stabbing him.
Here's the deal. If he was straddling her, how did she knee him in the cookies? He would have had to have been straddling her on her knees. But usually when you straddle somebody, you're on their waist.
Things that only a man would think about, knowing where the cookies are in relation to the knee.
No, it's true. It's true, though. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, there's a lot of stuff that's not going to make sense.
Okay.
Now, in the middle of all of this, little Bradley comes to the bedroom door and he knocks. And Susan gets off of her husband. She stops stabbing him. She answers the door. She takes Bradley back to bed, letting him know that everything is okay. And she returns to the bedroom with another knife from the kitchen and continues to stab Jeff.
Wow.
Quote, I stabbed him in the head, and I stabbed him in the neck, and I stabbed him in the chest, and I stabbed him in the stomach, and I stabbed him in his leg for all the times that he kicked me, and I stabbed his penis for all the times he made me have sex with him when I didn't want to. End quote.
Wow. Bobbitt's got nothing on her.
Susan then uses a dolly to cart her husband's body out of the house and into the backyard.
He had to have been bleeding all over the place.
Oh, yeah. She's going to hit him 193 times. Hang on. I'm going to get to that. Hang on.
Well, here's the other thing, too. I'm going to interrupt just one more time. 193 stab wounds. She's going to be pretty tired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's...
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that too.
Okay, all right.
So she uses a dolly. We have one in our house. We call it the Hello Dolly.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She uses a dolly to cart her husband's body out of the house and into the backyard. She's going to conveniently deposit him in the hole that Jeff dug for the fountain.
Well, that worked out.
And then cover him in this shallow grave.
Well, you know, it's funny when you said that he had dug that hole in the back. I went, yeah, I can pretty much see this one coming. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are people right now going, she already said that the dog was foreshadowing and he's buried in the backyard. We'll get to that. Hang on.
All right.
Susan said that she sat up all night long on the couch. She was waiting for Jeff to get out of the grave and come and kill her. And the best way I can describe this is that she's going to act like Michael Myers or Jason is in that grave. And you can't kill him, and he's just going to keep coming after her.
Okay.
Over the next few days, Susan says she was in a fog. I'm in a fog. I don't know what's going on. But the next day, January 14th, Susan files a restraining order against Jeff with Deputy Constable Scott Hall. But she was also clearing out their joint checking account. And she's buying bags of soil, 10 of them to be exact, so she can cover up the body a little bit better. Or as she put it, quote, she was weighing him down because he's going to get out of the grave.
Okay. All right.
There was blood everywhere in the bedroom, exactly what you were talking about.
Okay.
The bed, the walls, the ironing board that was up, the carpet, all of it. She bought bleach. She started cleaning. She tore up the carpet. She repainted the room.
Okay.
I have pictures of all of this. I will post them in the In-Laws and Outlaws. On January 17th.
Wait, so here's the thing. If you murder your spouse, because in the way the police work is usually the spouse is the first person they look at, right? So if you murder your spouse and then you conveniently remodel a room in your house, that's probably not a good thing.
Oh, she doesn't even do a good job of it, too, but hang on.
Okay.
That's important to know. She does a terrible job of it.
All right.
On January 17th, Deputy Hall calls Susan to let her know that the restraining order has been issued, and she tells him she doesn't know where Jeff is. But when Susan's mother starts to question her about Jeff, I believe her mom out and out asks, Susan, did you kill Jeff? She says, yes, but it wasn't her. Quote, it wasn't me, Mama. I snapped, end quote.
Wow. So she admits it.
She admits it.
Okay.
So Susan's family hops into action. They call a top defense attorney in Texas. They tell Neil Davis the whole story. And in turn, he walks into the DA's office and says, I have a client who has a body. And they call the police department and they all head out to the Wright home. Now, Lieutenant Danny Billingsley, the homicide chief at Harris County Sheriff's Office, goes to the scene. He's the first one there. Here's what he finds. In the backyard, they discover Jeff Wright's partially buried body in a shallow hole next to the patio.
She didn't even bury him well.
The officers also found a mattress, box springs, comforter, and headboard in the backyard. The mattress was soaked with blood. Inside the home, one wall of the master bedroom had been freshly painted, and a piece of carpet had been cut out. Painting supplies, a box cutter, and scissors were found in the room. Blood spatters were seen on the curtains and other items in the bedroom. A receipt for 2 gallons of bleach and bleach-stained size 6 jeans and a bleached towel are also found.
So you can pretty much count out circumstantial evidence.
Yeah, there's nothing circumstantial here. Now, Jeff was easy to spot because the family dog, the same one that Susan said Jeff abused, well, he had partially dug up his master and even eaten part of Jeff's hand.
Oh, how sweet.
Karma.
Yeah, exactly.
And just as I told you before, Jeff had been stabbed, something that Susan admitted to. The medical examiner concluded Jeff Wright died of multiple sharp force injuries. He had been, I read that and I thought, yeah. He had been stabbed at least 193 times.
Jeez.
And among these injuries, Jeff suffered 41 stab wounds to his face, 23 to his neck, 46 to his chest, 22 to his stomach, 7 to his pubic region, including a superficial cut on his penis, 19 to his legs, 23 to his arms and hand, and 1 to his back. The tip of a knife, the first knife, was broken off in the top of his skull.
Jeez.
Jeff's body was found nude and face down. The dog had unearthed his head, left shoulder, and left arm.
Wow. How long did it take her to do this? I mean, was this like an all-evening party event?
Well, she says that after it all happened and she buried him, she sat on the couch with her knife waiting for Jason to rise from the grave.
Jeez, wow.
But here's the kicker. Jeff had what was described as ligatures on his arms and one leg. Specifically, tied around each wrist was a necktie, and tied around the right ankle was what appeared to be part of a bathrobe sash. And candle wax is found on Jeff's thigh, buttocks, and scrotum.
Uh-oh.
Now, she stabbed him on the bed. He has neckties on each of his wrists and a bathrobe tie around one ankle and red wax on his body, particularly the cookies.
Right.
So is she Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct?
Yes.
Or is she a battered housewife? Or is she possibly both, right?
Yeah. Wow. And she didn't remove the neckties or the bathrobe tie?
No.
Wow. This is not a Mensa candidate.
Now, when they find the body, police call Neil Davis and say, that's her attorney. They call Neil Davis and say, okay, well, where's your client? And could your client happen to be the dead guy's wife? Mm-hmm. And he says, yes, it's the wife. And no, you can't talk to her because we've checked her into the psych ward at Ben Taub Hospital, General Hospital.
All right.
So while Susan is in the psych ward, apparently she's babbling to herself, according to her doctors there, and she's roaming the hallways looking for Jeff, afraid that he's going to kill her.
Wow.
Now, meanwhile, back at the house, police find the mattress and the box spring. They find all the bags of topsoil and the bleach and the paint and the carpet's been cut out. And the police are thinking if she was trying to cover this up, she did a shit job. But at the same time, in the days that transpired between the stabbing and the confession, again, she'd cleaned out the checking account. She'd filed a restraining order on a man that she knew was dead. You know, the police discovered that she had cleaned out the kids' rooms and packed some of their stuff in her car. So was she planning to flee? Was she planning on running?
Right.
Now, the toxicology report comes back and it shows that Jeff had cocaine in his system, but he also had alcohol and GHB, gamma hydroxybutyrate.
What's that?
Liquid ecstasy. It's the central nervous system depressant known as the date rape drug. It is taken orally, either in liquid or powdered form. It is odorless and colorless, but it does have a salty taste. Did she roofie him?
And the plot thickens, as my dad used to say.
Yeah. Did she drug him? Did she drug him, tie him up, and stab him 193 times, stopping in the middle to put her son back to bed, then going back to continue stabbing him? And you've already said this, but I have it in my notes. Do you know how much effort it would take to stab a human body, a 6'3", 220-pound body, 193 times?
Gee whiz.
That is overkill, right? Overkill.
Yeah.
But at the psych ward, she's babbling. Or is she? Because she's going to tell one of the doctors there that when she stabbed Jeff, Jeff was asleep.
Really?
So her story, it differs from time to time.
Why would she tell him that?
I don't know. I mean,
is she nuts or is she crazy like a fox?
Good question.
Okay.
Or is she really good at acting like she's nuts?
Yeah.
Was he this horrible, horrible man? She never had any visible signs of abuse.
Did he have any friends?
He had friends who said he was a doting father and loved being a family man.
Wow.
So that's why I'm saying I'm not taking sides. Y'all can figure this out.
Yeah, me either. I just, it's a lot of questions.
Yes. But Susan is charged with murder and her bond is set at $30,000. And taking on the case is DA Kelly Siegler.
Okay.
Now, this chick is a firecracker.
Okay.
Like a firecracker. This whole case, from opening to closing statement, was on court TV. I have not watched it. I've seen like little bits and pieces, but just from her interviews, damn girl, she is on fire.
Sharp.
Yes. Yeah. She's a sharp cookie.
Sharper than Susan's knives.
In the opening statement at trial, Kelly tells the jury that Susan killed her husband rather than to seek a divorce and that she sought to gain $200,000 from a recently acquired insurance policy on Jeff's life. And according to the state, on the night Jeff was killed, Susan undertook an elaborate plan to seduce him so that in anticipation of lovemaking, he would allow her to tie him to their bed.
There you go.
And once Jeff was tied up and defenseless, Susan emerges with a knife and anger, and she brutally stabs him over and over and over again.
Wow.
Then in the week that followed, she buries Jeff's body in the backyard, works to cover up the evidence of her crime, begins a campaign of, quote, lies and fabrications, end quote, telling Jeff's family and friends that Jeff had hit their son, abused her, and left home.
Okay.
As part of her plan, Susan also reports this physical abuse to her doctor and filed criminal charges against Jeff, resulting in a warrant being issued for his arrest. It was only after the family dog digs up Jeff's body that the state concluded that Susan's plan fell to pieces.
Good boy, Ubu.
Did she drug him, tie him up, and stab him 193 times, stopping in the middle to put her son back to bed, and then go back to stabbing him again? Yeah.
Well, and the thing is, at first I was thinking, why would she drug him if she had him tied up? But he's a big man, and she was probably worried that he could break free, so she drugged him first so he would be out of it.
All things are possible.
Yeah.
All of these things are possible.
I'm drawing some theories
You
here.
are.
Okay.
Now, Neil Davis, he's the defense, his opening statement countered, saying that Susan acted in self-defense. Jeff Wright had emotionally and physically abused Susan throughout their marriage, and the reason she didn't leave him was that she was afraid he would kill her. And on the night of his death, Jeff had come home under the influence of cocaine, hit their son in the face, and when Susan told him that he needed help for his rage issues, he gets violent. He throws Susan on the bed. He forcibly rapes her and threatens to kill her with a knife. Susan struggles with him, gets it away from him, stabs him several times, and at that point, Susan has a break from reality. She tied one of Jeff's hands to the bed and continued stabbing him in a panic that he would come back to life. And over the following week, in her delusional state, Susan continued to believe that Jeff was still alive. And the number of stab wounds on Jeff's body, well, the defense says that it's just evidence of her fear, not a premeditated, cold-blooded killing. And the neckties and bathrobe, those were used when she tied his body to the dolly to haul him out to the backyard to bury him. And the candle wax, it was burning in the room, and when she tried to get him off the bed, the candle fell, spilling wax on him, specifically the cookies.
I mean, it's all plausible.
All plausible.
Yeah.
Where's the truth?
Right. Good attorneys.
After calling several witnesses to explain how Jeff's body was located and what the police officers found at the Wright home, lead prosecutor Kelly Siegler brought in the Wright's blood-stained bed and set it up in the courtroom to demonstrate their theory for the jury.
Wow. Now that's a floor show.
And when she says, I'm going to do this, defense counsel Neil Davis says, no, you're not.
Yeah.
And Judge Jim Wallace says, I'll allow it.
There you go. Good job, Judge.
Quote, produce whatever reenactment you wish as long as the proper predicate has previously been laid to show there is some basis in fact for the demonstration you wish to portray it.
I always wish I was smart enough to talk like that.
End quote. I think that was official. So the prosecution calls in Detective Mark Reynolds, who was the lead detective and also present at the autopsy. He's there when they unearthed Jeff's corpse. And the autopsy showed a few things. Almost all the wounds were on the front of the body, as if it was forced to be face up.
Right.
There were nicks to Jeff's penis, a stab in the eye.
Ew.
This was a slow and painful death. It was brutal.
Wow.
And the ligature marks on his wrists and ankle were consistent with being tied to the bed, not a dolly.
Right. See, and the thing is, if they're trying to say that she tied his leg and arm to the... No, when you put something on a dolly, you would go around the circumference of the body itself so it didn't
You need some twine for that.
Yeah.
Not a necktie.
Well, and two, you're not going to tie a leg and an arm. That's not going to keep the body on the dolly. Listen, when I bring home mulch and put it on the dolly, half the time, 3/4 of the bags are falling off because I haven't secured them in the dolly. Same thing with the body.
Well, I'm pretty sure that Jeff's body fell off because the coroner is going to say he had scrape marks on the front of his body that would have shown that he'd fallen off and then she had to drag him across asphalt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But DA Kelly Siegler shows the jury that she, too, is about the same size as Susan Wright. And Detective Reynolds just happened to be 6'3", about 220. And so she stands in front of him. She shows the jury the size difference between the two of them. And she says, how could Susan, just by kneeing her husband Jeff in the cookies, gain control over him and then get him on his back and stab him 193 times?
Yeah, exactly.
Then she has Detective Doyle lie on the blood-soaked mattress.
Ew.
She ties him up. She straddles him with a knife and shows how the prosecution says Susan stabbed Jeff. This is no lie. There are photographs of this. Apparently, when Court TV was live, there's a bed in the courtroom in front of the jury box, and she is on top of this detective, straddling him, showing how she would use a downward motion with the knife, which is consistent with the autopsy report, 193 times.
Gee whiz.
Then, when she's finished with the whole bedroom routine,
Right.
Susan's team is up, and they say that on the evening of January 13th, Jeff came home from a boxing lesson. He was agitated. He hit their son. Then he takes a shower. Then he went into their bedroom wearing a towel. Susan told him unless he got help with his drug abuse and anger, she, quote, wouldn't take it anymore. Jeff became angry, threw her down, kicked her, and sexually assaulted her. Susan closed her eyes during the sexual assault, quote, like she always did, end quote, when he forced her to have sex. And then when Susan felt Jeff get back on top of her and hear him say, die, bitch, that's when she opened her eyes, sees the knife. She grabs the knife. It comes down, her leg jerks up and hits him in the groin because, quote, she didn't want to die. And she said that she found the strength to get the knife and push him off of her, and she stabbed Jeff in the neck. And as she fought with him for the knife, she stabbed him again, this time in the chest. So what they're trying to show is, she incapacitated him quickly.
Right.
Neck and chest. Yeah.
Okay.
So all those, it's all she had to get him was once.
Right.
To make him go down.
Right. But her defense is she had a break from reality.
She had a break from reality, and she said that she was so terrified that he would come back to life. That is why she kept stabbing him.
She watches too many movies.
And she only stopped when, her son knocks on the bedroom door, and she says that that's when she tied his arm to the bed. So it is consistent with tying, So
Okay.
she does admit to that.
Yeah.
But she only did it because she said she was keeping him from getting up while she put her son back to bed.
So she only did one arm.
She's saying she only did one arm, but there are ligatures on both arms, and there's a tie on his right and left wrist when he's in the hole in the backyard.
She didn't think this through very well.
Right.
Yeah.
But after she stabbed him 193 times, when she finally stops, she tries to get his body out of the house, and when she tried to drag him, his head and shoulder hit the nightstand, causing the candle to fall, right? So we've talked about this whole thing, but this is what she's saying on the witness stand.
Okay.
And then she says she tied him to the dolly by the ankles and the left arm and pushed the dolly out to the patio. Now, on cross-examination, firecracker Kelly Siegler, she completely dismantles Susan. After 5 hours of questioning, Kelly gets her chance with her. She shifts the attention from Susan, the mother, to her past as Susan, the stripper.
The cupless stripper.
And she also hammers Susan on whether or not she tied Jeff up before stabbing him. And Kelly asks Susan while she's on redirect, quote, and when you stabbed him the 56th time, or the 89th time, or the 158th time, was your arm getting tired? End quote.
That's the question I wanted to know.
Yeah. So 2 days later, the jury reaches a verdict. Now, she could get 25 years to life for this murder. And they come back, and the jury says...
It's got to be guilty.
Guilty.
Yeah. Okay.
How long? What do you think her sentencing is?
I'm going to say life, no parole.
25 years.
What?
25 years.
Wow.
But not so fast.
Okay.
Because in the back of the courtroom covering the trial for television is a man named Brian Weiss. And he found himself outraged by Kelly's portrayal of Susan and what he called, quote, her blatant attempts to mislead the jury with misconceptions and stereotypes about battered women, end quote.
Okay.
He was almost as concerned about the way her defense team, Susan's defense team, had handled the case because after her conviction, he persuaded her and her family to let him file her appeal.
Okay.
So all of this is heard again in front of the same judge, and he takes 4 months to decide that, yes, we can have another sentencing hearing.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
a foregone conclusion that she killed him.
Right.
But how long should she stay in prison?
Okay. So that's what this is all about. How much time is she
How
going to
much
serve?
time should
Okay.
she be in prison?
Okay.
Because they never really talked about the fact that she suffered from battered woman syndrome.
Okay.
They never brought in anybody to talk about that.
Okay.
And here's what happens. Brian Weiss quickly learns that 10 months before the trial, a detective from the Harris County Sheriff's Office had taken a sworn statement from a girl named Misty McMichael, who is now married to University of Texas and Chicago Bears football star Steve McMichael.
Okay.
In 1989, she worked as a stripper at the Colorado Bar and Grill in Houston, and there she told the detective she met Jeffrey Wright, whom she called a, quote, big-time spender, end quote. They began dating and soon were engaged.
Okay.
Misty said she moved with Jeff to Austin, where he stayed with his parents, and she lived in a small apartment. Initially, she said he was charming, but he eventually became abusive, especially after he had been drinking. Misty said at first he verbally abused her. Then he threw her down the apartment's spiral staircase.
Oh, wow.
He backhanded her across the face. And in one particularly violent episode at a bar, he swiped at a glass on the table, breaking it and sending a shard into Misty's chin. So this is the police report I was talking about before.
Right. I remember that.
Jeff was arrested for assault with bodily injury, and Misty later explained to Brian Weiss that she asked the police to drop the charges because she feared that Jeff would do something worse to her after he got out of jail. But even after that episode, Jeff continued to abuse her, and when he would leave her at night to go out, and she suspected that he was out meeting other women, he would lock her inside their apartment.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So finally, Misty said she escaped. She fled to Houston. Jeff eventually found her, but by then she had another boyfriend, and she said Jeff never bothered her again.
Gotcha.
So Misty is a woman who can corroborate Susan's claims of abuse.
Okay.
One who, in Brian's words, showed Jeffrey to be a, quote, serial abuser with a Jekyll and Hyde personality, end quote. But Susan's original defense team later claimed that they hadn't been able to contact Misty. They left her messages, she never called back, and they just left it at that. Yeah, and they also admitted that they weren't crying in their milk over the fact that Misty hadn't called them back because they were afraid the jury wouldn't believe Misty because she had, quote, questionable character, end quote, including allegations of drug use.
And she was a stripper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Weiss, however, said he got her on the phone without any trouble. And he said, quote, sure, she had baggage, but that should not have prevented the jury from hearing her story, end quote. And
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
So to Brian Weiss, the attorney who's handling Susan's appeal, the most glaring mistake the defense attorneys made was the refusal to call Dr. Jerome Brown. After Neil Davis had Susan admitted to the psychiatric ward, he asked Dr. Brown, a longtime Houston clinical psychologist who has testified extensively for both the prosecution and the defense in a variety of criminal cases, to examine her. So Susan wouldn't make eye contact with Dr. Brown. She sighed. She broke into tears. Quote, her overall presentation had a distinctly dreamy, drifting, unfocused quality that clearly suggested that she was somewhere else. That's what Dr. Brown said.
Okay.
And when she did speak, she talked in a flat voice and seemed to be in what Brown called a, quote, disassociated state. Quote, as if she was up in the air looking down on herself, talking about things she was doing, end quote.
So was she like a Sybil or what?
No, she's just, they're saying that after she killed him, she just wasn't there anymore. She totally disassociated herself. And, you know, that's kind of a thing. So people who witness like horrible tragedies, murders, things like that,
Right.
I mean, your body has a way of protecting you.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of what they're saying, that, yes, she did all of this, but she did it because she was a battered woman. And then after it was over, she disconnected from the world because
Gotcha.
it was so heinous.
Gotcha.
Now, when Dr. Brown started asking her about Jeff, she became terrified, telling him that her husband was looking for her and her children. She wept as she talked about the way he had punched and kicked her. She mentioned how she tried to, quote, go away in her mind on those occasions when he would rape her. Jeff had, quote, embedded himself in her psyche in a way that made him bigger than life. He was very, very powerful and very, very threatening, end quote. That's what Dr. Brown is saying.
Okay.
Then Dr. Brown asked her about the night that she killed Jeff. And according to Brown's notes, Susan talked about the way Jeff had shouted at her and shaken her after she told him he needed help and how he'd forced her to have sex. Then Susan told him that Jeff went to sleep. It was only after he was asleep, she said, that she went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and started stabbing him. So that's a discrepancy between the other story.
That's a totally different story.
It's a totally different story. And Susan told Dr. Brown the same story a month later, and Dr. Brown assumed that he would be testifying at her trial, and he planned to tell the jury that Susan essentially had snapped. Quote, I think she'd been able to tolerate the abuse as long as Jeff directed it on her. But when the abuse started spilling over to Bradley, her little son, she lost it. And on the night she stabbed her husband, she had some kind of mental break, and she stayed that way for days, probably weeks. I don't want to say she became completely psychotic, but she drifted in and out of reality. She didn't have any real idea what she was doing or why, end quote.
Okay.
Now, the day before jury selection, Neil Davis called Dr. Brown and said he had just read his notes. And he informs Dr. Brown that Susan never told him or his counterpart about Jeff falling asleep. She had told them about Jeff wielding a knife and shouting, die, bitch. And it's at this point her defense team decides that Dr. Brown's not going to be testifying. They don't want there to be a second version out there of events.
Right.
Yeah. They needed it to stay that she was facing imminent harm and she killed Jeff in self-defense.
And not the fact that he was just asleep and she went in and... Yeah.
He raped her. He went to sleep. Then she went and got the knife.
Right.
So that kind of hints at the fact, did she roofie him?
Yeah.
And then go get the knife?
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Brown said that he could explain to a jury the discrepancy in Susan's stories. And he said that when he was seeing her in the weeks immediately after the murder, she was still so traumatized that she wasn't able to recall all the things that happened that night. And maybe her mind just couldn't handle the scene of Jeff trying to stab her. But then gradually, as time passed, more details came back to her. And what happened to her was not much different from a case of someone who suffered severe sexual abuse as a child, but didn't have any memories of the abuse until years later. And that's a thing. And Dr. Brown said that Susan's telling one story about the killing and then telling another was, quote, not unreasonable, end quote, from a psychological standpoint. So what he was saying is, okay, I know it sounds hinky, but she is not in her right mind.
Right. Well, obviously.
Yeah.
Regardless of what happened.
But her defense team thinks that's a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And they're not going to call him to the stand.
Okay.
And even when she goes back to appeal how long she's going to be in jail, her attorney said, to this day, I would not have called Dr. Brown to her trial. This is Neil Davis saying this.
Her attorney.
Her attorney,
right,
yeah.
Right.
He's saying, even though we're back and we're going to have this appeal, even now, looking back, she got 25 years, I still wouldn't have called him.
Right.
But in the process, he lost the one qualified expert who sat down with Susan, who was prepared to tell a jury that she wasn't a cold-blooded killer, that she had suffered at the hands of her husband, that she was an abused and battered woman. Now, both sides are arguing this thing to death. Because Kelly Siegler is over the top with this bed. It's too much for the jury. Susan's defense team says she's not going to kill anybody for $200,000 and she's out of her damn mind. The DA is like, well, she never reported her husband as an abuser. There's not one photo, one police report. Not until after she kills him is there a police report. Quote, I don't think anyone will ever figure out Susan Wright's entire motive or understand the depth of her anger. This is Kelly saying this. Quote, I do think she was angry that she and Jeff had a very dysfunctional marriage. I also think she was angry with her father, and maybe she was angry about other parts of her own past. Her anger consumed her. But please, she didn't do what she did because she was a battered woman. We looked and looked for just one piece of evidence that proved she was being abused. A police report, a hospital record, a statement to Child Protective Services, something.
Yeah.
There was nothing, end quote.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I've heard cases like this before where, a woman is battered and she, she'll confide to her girlfriend or a friend or somebody that can, corroborate the accusations.
Sure. And I mean, I did read doing my research that, she did tell her sister. And remember, she packed up and left at one point.
Yeah. Okay. All
so
right.
she actually did pack up and leave.
Okay. All right.
But that doesn't mean that he beat her.
Right.
That just means that they didn't get along.
Right.
So when Susan gets this second sentencing hearing, the jury this time could give her life instead of 25 years the 25 years she already had. She's really rolling the dice.
Right.
She is taking a gamble here. And I've seen interviews with her. She thinks she's getting out. She's like, when they hear the truth, they're going to let me out. Yeah, it's going to happen. And they're thinking when the jury hears this all again, this time there's no bed.
Right.
That they might change her sentence from 25 years to time served or whatever. Mm-hmm. What she does get is 20 years. They change it from 25 to 20.
Okay.
But Susan's new counsel wants to know why no expert witnesses were ever called. She suffered from this battered wife syndrome. There was no one there to ever talk about that fact. Susan had all the evidence in her corner for her behavior of being a battered wife. But it only takes the new jury 5 hours, and her sentence is changed from 25 to 20 years. Okay. Now, she's going to have some parole hearings. One on February 28th, 2014, she's denied. On June 12th, 2014, she's denied. And again on July 24th, 2017, all denied.
Okay. Until
July 2nd, 2020. Susan is granted parole and is released on December 30th, 2020, at the age of 44 after serving 16 years of her 20-year sentence.
Okay.
Now, Ron Wright Jr., who is Jeff's brother, and his wife are actually raising Susan and Jeff's 2 children. She lost custody of them both. She never saw them the entire 16 years she was in prison.
Wow.
I do not know if that relationship has been repaired or not, but if she was trying to save her kids, she lost them, lost herself, lost everything in the process.
Yeah.
So was she a battered wife? Probably.
Right.
Was it calculated murder? Probably.
Right.
Like we always say, there are no winners in any of these cases, of course.
Right.
But you can discuss this amongst yourselves and the in-laws and outlaws. Come join us in there and we can talk about it because there's a lot to be debated here.
Yeah.
Before I go, I do want to give you a phone number because if you feel like you're a victim of domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233.
Say that number one more time.
1-800-799-7233. No one should have to live as a battered spouse, male or female. No one should have to live that way.
Right.
But that is the story of Susan Wright and her dead husband, Jeff Wright. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com. And thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Wow.
That'll give you something to think about before you go to bed tonight.
I mean, everything was plausible. I mean, it's horrible if what she says is true.
Yes.
It's horrible if she made up some of the stuff so she could justify killing him in the way that she. I mean, that's just messed up.
Yeah, the whole thing, and who knows? It's a he said, she said, and only those two people know what really happened, and one of them's gone.
Yeah.
So I will say, his family, they're not fans. They don't like her. They said that when Misty, the old girlfriend, showed up, to corroborate the fact that he was an abuser, that there's a quote where his dad says, well, it's some sort of stripper club where they take up for each other. And
okay.
To which I say, whatever, dude.
Yeah, whatever.
Whatever, dude. Whatever.
Well, speaking of whatever, how about we do a little bless your heart?
Let's do it.
Well, bless your heart.
Okay, I'm going to do a new form of bless your heart. I'm going to call it the speed round. I have
The
four.
what?
It's the speed round. I have 4 little bless your heart shorts
Okay.
that I'll do. The first one.
This is bless your little heart.
Little heart. Yes, it is. Number 1, Maganga is what it's called. So on a sunny day in March, Maganga, a 17-year-old boy in Omaha, Nebraska, decided to stick a gun in the face of a woman who was taking her son to school, demanding that she give him her car.
Okay.
She, of course, obliged, and the boy was about to take off when he realized the car had a manual transmission.
And he can't drive a stick.
Which he was unable to drive.
Oops. Bless his little heart.
Yeah, he tried to fumble around with the controls, but after moving the car only a matter of yards in a few minutes, he decided to bolt on foot.
And stripping the gear shift.
Yeah, he was eventually caught by authorities.
That's a horrible sound when you're trying to...
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, number 2, Derek Mosley. Planning is hugely important when trying to pull off a crime, and it's essential to success of the act that every detail be well thought out in advance. But Derek Mosley didn't place very high importance on these things before he decided to rob a gun store armed with only a baseball bat.
Oh,
bless his
little
heart. Seeing as it was a gun shop, the manager pulled a gun on the would-be robber.
Can you imagine the gun that he pulled to? What's the line? What's the line? Do you feel lucky? What is the line that Clint Eastwood says? Young people probably don't know this.
Well, punk, do you feel lucky? The manager pulled a gun on the would-be robber and kept him in the crosshairs until authorities arrived.
Bless his little heart.
Number 3, Mark Smith. Breaking into homes can be tiring work, but most criminals are smart enough to wait until they get home before taking a nap. Not Mark Smith, though. In 2007, Smith, who was high on Valium and drunk on vodka, decided to break into a home, and since he was feeling the effects of the drugs and alcohol he consumed, he had curled up for a nap in the homeowner's bed. He was woken up by local police and sentenced to 18 months.
That's the Goldilocks.
Yeah.
The Goldilocks case.
Yep. All right.
Valium and vodka.
Yep.
V squared.
And last but not least, Klaus Schmidt. In August of 1995, a man in Berlin decided to rob a bank with a handgun. Now, this acted out like a pretty standard bank robbery until the tellers asked him, "Do you need a bag?" To which Schmidt responded, "You're damn right it's a real gun." This made it obvious to the tellers that the robber was deaf. With this new realization, it gets better. With this new realization, they sounded the alarm, which notified the police while Schmidt was none the wiser.
And he didn't hear it.
No. In a funny twist, Schmidt later sued the bank for apparently abusing his disability. Oh, bless his heart.
Oh, bless his little heart. Well, I'm sorry that, he's hearing impaired, but don't go rob a bank.
Just dumber.
Dummy.
Yeah. Well, there's your speed round.
I liked that.
Yeah, we'll do them every once in a while.
Well, if you have a little bless your heart or you have a big bless your heart,
yep.
You can send it to us. Go to the website, hitchedtohomicide.com. Pull down the little menu. There's a little place for you to fill it all out. You can also suggest a case.
Yeah.
That's all we have this week. That's my husband out there in the studio on the new platform for
the new
Hitched to Homicide.
And that's my beautiful bride in the cage in there.
It rubs the lotion on its skin. It does this whenever it's asked. Put the lotion in the basket. That's all we've got.
Yeah. Bye, y'all.